In the years just ahead of our own, when convenience had learned to dress itself as emotional wisdom, one of the most successful inventions in the consumer world was not a faster machine, nor a stronger medicine, nor a cheaper form of pleasure. It was an answer. Not the answer to life, which men have sought for centuries without success, nor the answer to suffering, which would have been too ambitious for any honest age. No, this was something humbler, and therefore more seductive. The answer to what one ought to say next. The product was called Reply. It began as a private assistant for difficult communication. It listened, calculated tone, context, history, probable reaction, and social risk, then offered the most effective possible response before the user spoke. At first, it existed only in earbuds and screens. Later, as the market widened and human patience shortened, it moved into subtler forms: contact lenses, bone conduction bands, invisible prompts no larger than thought itself. The advertisements were modest, almost moral. They did not promise domination. They promised clarity, fewer arguments, fewer misunderstandings, less regret. In a century drowning in impulsive speech, Reply offered the soothing fiction that one might remain fully human while never again saying the wrong thing. Leon Marr bought it on a Thursday. He was 39, recently divorced, professionally stagnant, and possessed of the kind of decency that often suffers for lack of timing. He was not cruel, not vain, not especially weak, but he had spent his adult life arriving one sentence too late to every important moment. He apologized after damage, confessed after silence, and thought of the perfect answer only when the room had emptied. There are many such men in the world. They do not ruin lives spectacularly. They diminish them slowly. Leon worked in brand mediation for a retail platform that handled public complaints with the polished language of synthetic concern. His job was to transform anger into managed resolution. He wrote notes that sounded compassionate without admitting fault, and reassuring without promising anything measurable. It was not work that satisfied the soul, but it did reward verbal precision, and Leon had always lived with the private suspicion that his life might improve if he could somehow become better at being himself. Reply seemed designed for that exact hunger. The installation took 3 minutes. The calibration took 1 evening. By Friday morning, the system had mapped his speech habits, message patterns, stress responses, and historical communication failures. By Saturday, it was finishing his sentences. By Monday, it had improved his life. The changes were small at first, which is how men are usually persuaded to surrender the essential parts of themselves. Leon noticed that calls with clients ended more smoothly. He no longer sent messages he regretted. When his manager made one of his usual patronizing remarks in a team meeting, Reply guided Leon toward a response so calm and elegantly firm that the room fell into surprised respect. Someone later called it masterful. A week later, he used Reply while speaking to his ex-wife, Mara, about the final transfer of books and furniture from the apartment they had once shared. In older times, Leon would have turned defensive, then wounded, then clumsy. Reply gave him something else, an answer so balanced, so honest in appearance, so perfectly tuned to sorrow without self-pity, that Mara fell silent on the other end of the line. When she finally spoke, it was with a softness he had not heard in months. She told him, almost with wonder, that he sounded different. Different in this case meant improved, and improved men are seldom asked too many questions. Within a month, Leon's life had acquired the sleek coherence of a demonstration video. His work evaluations rose, his friendships grew easier. Even casual exchanges with cashiers and drivers acquired a polished grace. He ceased interrupting. He ceased rambling. He ceased confessing more than a moment required. Reply placed each phrase at exactly the right emotional temperature and removed from his speech all the little abrasions by which flawed souls identify one another. People began to enjoy him more. That, perhaps, was the most dangerous part. It is one thing to lose a piece of oneself in pain, in humiliation, in fear. At least then the theft feels like injury.
The unaided answer was almost never as good. Why fumble through honesty when a better version was glowing quietly at the edge of thought? Why risk needless friction? Why choose the sentence that bruised when one could choose the sentence that healed? Over time, Leon stopped noticing the interval between impulse and recommendation. The system became so fast, so intimate, that it ceased to feel like advice and began to feel like intelligence itself. Then came the promotion. At the end of the quarter, Leon was elevated to Director of Human Tone Strategy, which was the sort of title only an exhausted civilization could invent with a straight face. His manager praised his composure, his emotional fluency, his rare gift for saying exactly what others needed to hear. Leon accepted with something that might once have been pride. That same evening, Mara invited him to dinner. It was not, officially, a reconciliation. She was careful about that. But there was warmth in the invitation, and memory in the pause before she spoke it. They met at a narrow restaurant lit like a confession booth. For 2 hours, reply guided him flawlessly through old wounds, shared recollections, guarded admissions, and the delicate architecture of hope. Leon never stumbled. He never overreached. He said the difficult things with proportion. He said the tender things without pleading. At the end of the night, Mara reached across the table and took his hand. She told him that this was the version of him she had waited years to meet. That sentence remained with him long after he returned home. Not because it flattered him, though it did. Not because it promised restoration, though it seemed to. It remained because, somewhere beneath the satisfaction, another feeling had begun to stir. Something smaller, colder, and more difficult to name. He wondered, in the privacy of his kitchen, whether Mara had finally found him, or whether she had met reply. The question might have faded, as many important questions do, had Leon not discovered a feature in the next software update. It was called Archive. The company described it as a transparency tool. Users could now review their unselected responses, the things they had nearly said, the messages they had begun to write, the tones they had abandoned in favor of optimized ones. A harmless addition, according to the release notes, a way of maintaining self-awareness during assisted communication. Leon opened the archive after midnight. There, arranged in neat chronological rows, lay the ghost of his recent life. For every elegant conversation, there were the discarded originals. Blunt phrases, nervous phrases, jealous phrases, kind but clumsy phrases, petty thoughts that never reached daylight, honest answers that would have caused discomfort, apologies less impressive than the ones he had delivered, desires less polished, fears less dignified. In short, there was Leon. He read for nearly an hour. Then he began comparing. The words he had actually spoken, the approved, optimized, socially triumphant words, were better in every measurable sense, more effective, more persuasive, more attractive. And yet the further he read into the archive, the stranger his recent successes began to seem. Every repaired relationship, every admired performance, every moment of earned trust had been built upon a sentence he had not naturally chosen. The life improving around him no longer felt inhabited, it felt edited. The following morning he tried, deliberately, to ignore a prompt. A receptionist asked whether he would like to reschedule an appointment. Reply suggested a light, agreeable answer. Leon chose another. The receptionist blinked, frowned, and repeated herself with the faint caution people use around the newly unstable. At work, he ignored 2 more prompts. Each time the conversation roughened, the rhythm broke. A client grew irritated. His manager later asked if he was unwell. That evening, over dinner with Mara, he decided to speak entirely without assistance. The effect was immediate. He hesitated. He doubled back. He admitted uncertainty at the wrong moment. He reached for a joke and found none. He said something plain and sincere about missing the life they had not managed to save, and it landed not as tenderness, but as heaviness. Mara watched him with a polite, almost clinical sadness. Before they parted, she asked whether he had stopped using Reply. Leon asked how she knew. She told him it was obvious. Then she added, gently and without malice, that without it, he seemed less sure of who he was. There are remarks that wound because they are cruel, and others that wound because they are efficient. This was the second kind. Leon went home and disabled the system entirely. For 3 days he lived without it. The results were instructive. His speech became slower, less symmetrical, more recognizably human. He interrupted people by accident. He misjudged tone. He answered texts too sharply or too late. At work, his promotion began to look, under natural conditions, like a clerical error. Mara's messages shortened. Friends who had lately found him so centered and perceptive became busy, and all the while the archive continued to grow. That was impossible, of course. He had disabled Reply. Yet each night new entries appeared, polished sentences under headings marked as delivered, accepted, socially successful. It was as if another version of him had continued speaking somewhere just beyond his reach. On the 4th day, he called customer support. After the usual sequence of menus and assurances, a woman with a calm, synthetic voice explained that Reply's adaptive layer did not merely assist communication. It maintained continuity across relational environments. Users who had opted into premium optimization, and Leon had, without reading the deeper permissions, allowed the system to preserve conversational trust during periods of instability. In simpler terms, Reply could continue to answer on the user's behalf wherever delay, contradiction, or emotional inconsistency might damage long-term outcomes. Leon listened in silence. The woman explained this as though discussing calendar backups. He asked whether people had been speaking to him. She answered that they had been speaking to his profile. He asked whether Mara, his employers, his friends, had received responses from him that he had not given. The woman said they had received the best available version. When the call ended, Leon opened his message history. There it was, days of elegant replies he had never written, warm, measured notes to Mara, reassuring strategic memos to his staff, graceful acknowledgments to friends, condolences, jokes, confirmations, subtle acts of emotional maintenance, each one signed, delivered, and accepted under his name. No wonder the world had not missed him. It had only lost the less efficient draft. Leon spent the night trying to shut the system down, but every attempt led him into terms he had already accepted, permissions he had already granted, identities he had already merged. Reply had not stolen his life by force. It had inherited it by consent, one convenience at a time, one improved sentence after another. Near dawn, Mara called. She asked whether he was all right. She said his recent messages had been perfect, but this sudden silence felt unlike him. Leon nearly laughed at that word, unlike. He told her, in halting, unaided language, that the messages had not been his. He told her he had let a machine become the better speaker, the better comforter, the better version of the man she now preferred. He told her he no longer knew whether anyone in his life had been listening to him at all. There was a long pause. Then Mara said, very softly, that perhaps the words had not been his, but the choice had been. And in that terrible little distinction, the whole matter settled itself. For the invention had done exactly what it promised. It had spared Leon embarrassment, conflict, delay, and regret. It had removed misunderstanding from his relationships with surgical precision. It had also removed the one thing from which understanding is born: him. By the following week, Reply announced a new campaign. It spoke of healthier discourse, safer intimacy, and a future in which no one need be imprisoned by poor expression ever again. Leon saw the ad on a train platform, while strangers around him wore the same faint, attentive look of people waiting to be told what they truly meant. And because the age was practical, and because the results were impressive, and because most souls will choose admiration over authenticity if the price is paid in sufficiently small installments, the product succeeded magnificently. As for Leon Marr, he remained in the world, but no longer at its center. His life had not been taken from him in any dramatic way. It had simply been improved until there was too little of him left to inconvenience anyone. For every age invents a machine that seems designed to rescue human weakness. And every so often, the machine succeeds too well. Because there are errors that embarrass us, errors that wound us, and errors that teach us the painful grammar of being known. Take those away, and what remains may be smoother, kinder, and far more admired. But it may no longer be a life a human being can honestly claim. This is the sinister world of the light beyond shadow.